Oh, there we go. All right, so a good day or good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us here today. And welcome to MASCA's second Suara Muda of this year. My name is Nicholas, and I'm the Deputy Chairperson for MASCA National. We hope you will enjoy hearing from our two panelists today and learn something about your future careers, whether they be in Malaysia or Australia. Just before we proceed, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we all gather from. We pay respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. So let me go through an overview of today's session quickly. So we'll allocate about the first hour for a discussion, and then we did receive quite a number of questions in the registration form, and we're sure that more will come through during the discussion. So we will leave 30 minutes at the end for that. During our discussion, though, do feel free to place all your questions in the chat so that we can raise them during the Q&A. Just as a housekeeping reminder, please keep your questions appropriate for our speakers and respect their expertise when posing your questions. Allow me to remind everyone as well that we will be hosting a lucky draw at the end of the event. Now, this is only open to participants who are attending now and who have registered through our link. So please make sure that you have registered and that you stick around throughout the event. If you haven't registered yet, I'll show a QR code very briefly, so feel free to scan that and register. All right, just with that housekeeping out of the way, let's turn our attention to today's webinar. We know that many of you here today, and including myself, we are Malaysian students but studying in Australian universities. And that means that we have big decisions to make when we graduate. Importantly, we're asking ourselves, where will we go after graduating? So on the one hand, we hear a lot of good things about working in Australia, and presumably that's why we came here to study. But on the other hand, home is home, after all, and many people go back to Malaysia and find a lot of success. Furthermore, if you joined us for our previous Suara Muda talking about brain drain, or what one of our speakers called brain circulation 2 weeks ago, you'll remember the various initiatives that are aimed at bringing talent back, and some of you may be eligible for those programs. So through today's discussion, we want to cover two sections to help you make this big decision. Firstly, we'll provide insights into some of the differences between working in Australia and working in Malaysia. And then we want to move on to insights into aspects that will help you find a good job, regardless of where you choose to work. So I'll keep it there for now, because obviously we want to hear from our experts, not myself. So we're honored to host two individuals with extensive and lived experiences in both Australia and Malaysia. So participants, that means that you can ask all that you want about the differences, because they will have answers for you based on what they have gone through. So I'd first like to introduce Kit Chuen from Praemium Limited, that is an investment platform based in Melbourne. So would you please like to introduce yourself for our audience?
Thank you, Nicholas, and welcome everyone. So I'm Kit Suan. I'm a financial controller currently in a listed financial services company in Australia. I've been in Australia for more than 20 years now, but originally from Malaysia. So grew up in Pahang and studied in a local school, went for a degree in Australia, and eventually I've worked both in Malaysia and for a short while for under 2 years, and eventually went over to Australia and have been working across a few different industries, consulting, financial services, insurance, and that's my main background. So looking forward to our discussion today, and welcome everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And we also have Angelina Yi. She comes from the Malaysian Australian Alumni Council, but she's also a professor at the Asia Pacific University. So would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Thank you very much to Nicholas, and good day to everyone. So I'm basically the Vice President of the Bilateral Relations for the Malaysian Australian Alumni Council, former CPA Australia Council member in Malaysia, and I'm also currently the one of the professor, of a local university, which is the Asia Pacific University. So my portfolio mainly looks after the research and the enterprise. So we hope that we'll be able to share with you some insights, in Malaysia as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And just on that note, from MASCA, we would like to thank MAAC, that's the Malaysia Australia Alumni Council, for their continued support in making the Suara Muda series possible, and especially Angelina, who's been very helpful throughout the series. So yeah, thank you to our two speakers for joining us today. I should just point out that they're obviously based in the different countries. So Suan is based in Melbourne, and then Angelina is based in Malaysia. So again, this is a great opportunity to ask questions from two people who are on the ground in the two areas. So yeah, feel free to ask the questions that are on your mind. So let's move on to our first section. And we want to start thinking about some of our discussion points. So I think in this section, what we want is to help students weigh out the pros and cons in the different countries, because there are so many factors to consider. And I think as students, our perspective is a bit different compared to when you're a working adult and maybe when you're thinking about having a family. The dynamic changes, and as students, we don't quite understand that. So with this first section, what we wanted to do was address some of those key points, maybe concerns that our students should be aware of, and just helping them to narrow down the decision and help them consider what is right for them. So I think the first question that we have is mainly directed to Angelina. Is working in Malaysia as bad as some people say it is?
Okay, thanks a lot, Nicholas. So this is a very tricky question, but it is a very valid question as well. Yeah, so working in Malaysia, it has been perceived as it's difficult. We work very long hours, mainly because, a small groups of people who actually support the economy, and we require to work longer hours and harder, all right, to bring the economy up to the level. But these are still remain as a perception. You start to see the changes. So due to the advancements of the technology, robotic, automation, so the country has actually been more productive. And we are also able to actually enjoy our weekends, without actually working the long hours as well. So if you want to talk about work-life balance, the country, the ministry has also started to embark, on the encouragement or encouraging businesses to actually promote the work-life balance. So if you see that there's an increase in terms of the other benefits to employee as well in Malaysia. For example, maternity leave has actually gone from 2 months to 3 months. Yeah, so it has also increased in terms of the other benefits, in terms of leaves, in terms of, well, people say that Malaysia has the most number of public holidays. So we celebrate everything under the sun. So basically, because we are multinational, so we actually celebrate quite a fair bit in terms of festive-wise. So basically, if you want to work hard, you can. All right. So there are people who actually enjoy working as well. You enjoy the activities over the weekend. So I believe that things has actually changed. Not as bad, but doesn't mean that you don't work hard as well, and doesn't mean that you don't work long hours. We do when there's actually deadlines as well. Okay.
Right. And so I guess one question that comes up then is with automation and things like that, is the job market in Malaysia still open? Do you think it's growing?
Good question. So we start to see a different perspective, in terms of this, in terms of the automation. So yes, if you look at Malaysia, we still have a high number of the we call it the foreign workers, from the certain countries like Bangladesh, Pakistan, all right, who actually comes to Malaysia, which are predominantly, supporting our construction, manufacturing sectors. So beside this, and maybe some of the other services sectors, yeah. So these are the three sectors, which are highly populated or supported by our foreign workers. So yes, automation will come in place, but it is not as fast as we would wish it to happen as well, because we are still enjoying these foreign workers which are in Malaysia. But as you start to see the automation and also the professionalism comes in place, there are more opportunity now as well, because Malaysia wants to move into the high income economy. So we do actually see there are more value add jobs, which actually opens up. For example, recently recently there's a news from the ministry, that would like to see, 25 more, cybersecurity engineers in 2025. They would like to see more technical, like from computer sciences, that's actually available. So we also have moved on. At the same time, Malaysia also encourages the startups in terms of students founded startups, in terms of the non-student startups. So there's also a growth and support for the business incubators in terms of incentive to the startups, incentive to the incubators. We also have seen the changes in terms of the law, in terms of regulatory, to allow the incentive for the venture capitalists. So in a way that, we are also encouraging more job creation, not just the employability perspective as well.
Right. Yeah. And I think that would be interesting when we come to section 2, and there we want to focus on kind of what's going to help people get a job. And then I guess to think about the industries and where it's going to grow would definitely be helpful for our students, just so they know kind of what to look forward to and how to prepare for that. So yeah, thank you for that. And then the next question would be, on the flip side, everyone's saying that, you come to study in Australia, you should try and stay here and work for at least a few years to gain experience. So do you think this, I guess, rule that people kind of come up with, do you think that should apply?
I'll take that question. Thank you, Nicholas. I don't know if this is so much a rule or people's expectations that if you come overseas to studies, why don't you take on the opportunity to work on as well for a few years to gain experience overseas, which can be valuable. But what you need to think about is what are the relevant sectors that you can seek experience in that will then be relevant to take home to your country. So in Malaysia, what are the areas that are growing in Australia that you can perhaps find opportunities? So putting aside visa requirements, so let's not talk about visa requirements, but if there were opportunities in certain industries that are specifically offered in Australia, how do you harness that when you go back to Malaysia? So that could work both ways. That could work against you and for you. So health, biomedical, those are the industries that are growing in Australia. But then when you go back to Malaysia, what are the opportunities? So that's like a plus and minus. It's always great to have your experience built overseas to bring home, but how do you harness it when you go home? It is the key question, if that answers the question. And it's very industry specific as well, where there are opportunities in Australia. Maybe that area hasn't grown so much yet in Malaysia, or conversely, there are areas of growth in Malaysia, but there's no opportunities of employment as such in Australia.
Mm-hmm. So I guess if you were to put it as a general rule, as long as that can be applied back to Malaysia, then you would encourage it?
I would think it's of value that you've worked overseas and you can bring your exposure and experience and then be able to apply it. Some economies move not in parallel, like they could be two speed or like, two pathways, even though we're all moving towards automation technology, but there are some areas where some parts are moving faster or slower than the other, and there's always opportunities. So I think it's good to have some overseas experience, open your eyes, and then take it back and apply it at home.
Yeah, thanks for that. And Angelina, you have experience kind of studying overseas as well and then heading back home. So what is your take on this?
Well, I have actually studied in Australia for my degree and master's. So I also worked part-time, when I was in Australia. Then I actually worked in Singapore and UK before going back to Malaysia. So I went to one big round. So it does actually gives me the opportunity, to learn the different culture, different way of thinking, different knowledge, and also very much mentored by different groups of people. So when you have your mentor from like UK, Singapore, and Australia, they all work differently. You just need to understand how they work, but it does gives me, benefits in terms of getting my jobs, in Malaysia.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm
It
sure
does
that
help.
flexibility,
Yeah.
being flexible. So if you don't mind us asking this personal question, but what led you to heading back home then?
Well, mom always says that because I come from single parent family, so I have to go back and look after and help my mom as well. So I guess that was the call, that I need to return. But I did attempt, of like thinking of submitting for migration to Australia 2 to 3 times. So it's not new as well, but never get to do it. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I guess once you settle down in family, then you just couldn't move away. Yeah,
Mm.
that easily. Yeah, it becomes a family decision rather than an individual decision.
That's true. And would you say for many people that decide to go back, that family is a factor as well?
Yeah, it does.
Mm, mm,
Mm.
right.
Especially for Asian families, Asian values, where family unit is quite important. For myself, when I studied in Australia, I did my Bachelor of Business major in accounting in Monash here, and I returned to Malaysia, and that was during the Asian financial crisis. So employment market wasn't that great back then, but the decision was always to go back and be with family. And how that changed later on, that was like a different path in life, but it's always, yeah, family is always core to everything.
Right. And I think even in our last Suara Muda, we were kind of speaking to, Talent who, their government mandate is to try and get people back. And I think one of the reasons that they highlighted was definitely family too. Do you think that there are other reasons that people should be or might be thinking about when deciding to go back?
For me, basically, I'll probably think that if you decide to come back, and if you have actually grown your network here, then basically you will probably want to stay on. But if you have decided to stay back in Australia, so that should be a calling and that should be a decision, that you make, and some also take a U-turn, after a while in terms of life, if you have seen that sometimes there's a job opportunity, as you want to climb the ladder of the professionalism, climb the ladder of leadership, you find that some restrictions in certain country. So you might also decide to come back to Malaysia if the opportunity arises as well. So there is no advice. I mean, there's not an advice, to say that when do you come back, when do you leave,
Mm.
so it's very much depends on the person's journey as well.
Right, right. Okay. Yeah, because I think when making the decision, a lot of people hear that it's just family purposes, and I guess that's where that perception comes from of you should stay in Australia, right? Unless you have a family reason to go back. But then I guess there would be other factors as well that, like you said, there might be blocks, visa things, these practical aspects that stop people as well. So yeah. Um, so our other question would be, are there some fields whereby working in Malaysia might actually be a better option than in Australia?
Yeah, there are some, like for example, all right, for ICT or computer science related. So Malaysia has you see a boom, and a growth in this sector. So coming from like, I'm just going to give a case study of APU, Asia Pacific University. So because APU is a tech university, so our students before they even graduate, they already had a job. So some student could come to me and say, look, Prof, I actually have 5 jobs, offer. So which one should I go? So we will sit down and evaluate with our students. So it was to that extent now, that we are we have a huge shortage, in terms of ICT and computer science, especially the boom of the technology. But of course, you will still see that, the medical, financial services sector, agriculture, all right? So we also see the boom. I mean, there's an increase in the need and demand, for the professionals actually. Yeah, so some of these areas you will probably see that there's a better opportunity, especially if you want to go up the ladder of the leadership, and greater opportunity if there is for trainings, for incentives, to be groomed. So yes, there is as well.
Right. And since both of you have kind of working experience in the two countries, would you say that it's somehow easier to climb the ladder in one country versus the other?
Maybe I'll start first. So for
Yes.
me, basically my experience was when I was in Australia was only as an accountant. So it is at a lower level rank as compared to coming back to Malaysia when I actually had the opportunity on the management and senior management. So yes, opportunity in Malaysia is a lot more, for me to actually go up the ladder of leadership based on married, in the private sector. So of course, public sector is a different, story, but in private sector, they still very much value the merit, your professionalism, your competency, your talent, communication skills, all right? How do you lead, in terms of your leadership skills? So yes, there are more opportunities in the private sector in Malaysia. So Kit?
And I'll talk to the Australian side. So I think like 20 years ago, it's a different story, but I believe that my generation has made it easier. So it was harder for us 20 years ago. When I first started, there's very little management with diversity in workplaces. So it was very, what's the correct word to use it? Like, you only have like your typical, to generalize, you have your white male manager or your white male CEO, and it's still quite typical now, but more and more so, and the generations with like from my generation, like from 20 years ago, we have kind of like paved the way to bring forth diversity. So when you have a manager that has a diverse background, they're also quite receptive to employ people from a diverse background. So that could be from other countries, different that don't speak English as their first language. So it's a lot easier now compared to, I would say, like 20 years ago.
Okay, and I think on that note of diversity, would it be true that in Australia, companies would value that more than in Malaysia?
Now, they're, especially like your top 200 ASX listed companies, they actually promote diversity as one of their core values. It's part of their core values to actually even promote that we hire for diversity. So I can only speak from my experience in Australia that it's definitely more so than 20 years ago. And a lot of companies, especially the top ASX listed companies, they would put diversity as their core values.
Right.
So for Malaysia, we have always been a multinational, multi-races. So, but you will start to see a diversity in terms of seeing more women in leadership as compared to 20 years ago. Yeah. So you start to see women, given different opportunity, which is on par with men as well. So that comes in Malaysian perspective mainly. Mainly is a gender equality.
Mm-hmm. I think that's good to hear for us because whether you're here, whether you go back, then those opportunities would be more, equal for people that are applying. So yeah, thank you for sharing about that. Then we have another question that came through, which was, especially in Australia, are there certain industries that are harder for non-Australians to enter, probably because of like visa requirements or other kinds of limitations, even if there is growing demand in that sector?
Yes, Nicholas, as we discussed pre this the start of this talk, that for example the medical line, for example, it's not my industry, but with friends who are doctors and such, it is harder to get in because if you come from a non-Australian degree background, then there'll be certain hurdles that you have to get over in terms of your qualification, converting it. Education is another one where even if you're a teacher, say from Malaysia, but to come over, you'll have to resit or retrain and get certification from here. So for certain very specific state qualification, there will be limitations. So that's the benefit, for example, for myself, when we studied here, if you did an Australian degree with, for example, for myself in accounting, a CPA, it was easy to then move from Malaysia to Australia because you already had an Australian certification as your background. So I would think that, yeah, converting the certification is a hurdle, and it's industry and state specific. So yeah.
Right. Yeah, and yeah, definitely. I mean, I come from like the kind of health background, so I would know that, yeah, there are a lot of restrictions for people working. But so I'm seeing a lot of our registrants, their degrees are in accounting, commerce, computer science. Would you say that those hurdles still exist in those kinds of fields?
I would say that they're easier than before. So for accounting, if you're from an Australian university, you will either do the path of a chartered accountant or a certified practicing accountant, and it's recognized here, very popular here. For IT degrees, there are certifications that you can do outside of your degree that is very, very popular here. So this is like the next level of learning. It could be like Agile, it could be like a Scrum Master, it could be Python programming that you can take outside of your uni degree that is widely accepted in workplaces here. So those areas are actually quite easy in terms of achieving, being able to achieve certification to then apply to a job in Australia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that would be fantastic to keep in mind during our second section when we start to, think about what should our students be doing to help them, navigate some of these hurdles. Angelina, I mean, we are Malaysians, right? So I guess you wouldn't have the same kinds of hurdles going back. But I guess the question on the flip side would be, if you have an Australian qualification and then you're going back home, might there be any limitations there?
No, there's
No.
actually even you are actually preferred by the private industries. So you actually do have a higher value, perceived to have a higher value as well. And I believe we do, being away from home, being need to learn to be independent, needs to learn to solve problem when you're out there in a in a foreign land, so you don't have the family support, so you need to learn how to actually find your own way. So that actually helps to craft us, in getting us ready for the workplace as well.
Mm-hmm. And does that apply even if you need, certain qualifications?
It doesn't. Yeah. So even CPA Australia is recognized by MIA, Malaysian Institute of Accountants. So we can actually be practicing our accountant without the need of sitting for additional papers. Actually, coming back is a lot more easier than going out.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, that must be very reassuring for our our audience here. So if you're choosing to work in Australia, then it's good that you have the local qualification. And then if you're going back, it's good that you have the overseas qualification because that's valued. Okay, well, that's great. Thank you for that. This was another interesting one. So if you have a family business back in Malaysia, does it help to go back as soon as possible and try and build your network there since you're kind of entering that sector? Or does it still help to stay overseas and try something out here?
All right. I have friends, in my peers, all right, who actually has a family business as well. So I have both ways. I have friends who actually decided to stay back to actually learn something new before they go back and embark on their taking over the family business. I have friends who actually decided to return to Malaysia, but yet they didn't return to their family business, but they actually go to other companies to explore and build certain skills before joining the family business. So either way, I actually have friends who mentioned that they actually felt that they can learn more outside of the organization so that they can bring change into their own organization.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's interesting because, um, well, we're all students, so I'm not too familiar with this. But I think what I hear a lot is a lot of my friends who do have family businesses, a lot of them will choose not to go back to the family business. So yeah, I'm sure that experience does help. Kitsuan, do you have any, I guess, from the Australian
Stories to
perspective?
share, yeah. In my network here in Melbourne, I've got Malaysian friends, Indonesian friends, and my friends are already at with children at university age, and so they're finishing their degrees. So a lot of them are actually preferring parents' choice, preferring that their children work in another company before returning to the family business. And echoing what Angelina mentioned, that you are bringing value from exposure, experience that you see elsewhere that you can bring back to your family business if that's the type of business that is run. There are various types of family business where it's very traditional, or it could be a very large family business. So I don't think there's any rush or need or hurry if it's really running by itself, but your experience that you're able to gain to then bring back into your family business later, it's quite valuable.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, that's good to hear. So I guess the takeaway being whatever you choose, as long as you're trying to get that experience, then that will work out in the end. Okay, great. All right. So I think before we move on, I think it'd be helpful for students to know kind of what resources should they be looking to if they're trying to decide, like make this decision. What should they be looking out for? What websites might be helpful for them?
Kate, you want to start first?
So I'll start from an Australian perspective. For students who are finishing towards the end of their degree and they're looking at opportunities, if you're looking at opportunities in Australia, you should have a look in LinkedIn, set up a profile in LinkedIn Australia, and focus on the industries that you're interested in, and then join some of the companies so that you could get alerts of what's going on. Jobs are often posted in LinkedIn as well, so it's a very good place to expand your network, see what's out there, see what are the discussion points relevant to different industries that you're interested in, and you can tap into that. The other thing that is also helpful is and everyone may not go the same path, but often people don't end up doing what they studied. So be open-minded and explore different things. It could be a personal choice. You might feel strongly you might have been studying because it was a choice made for you. But if you find other opportunities that you're interested in, explore those as well by engaging in local groups. If it's coffee making that you're interested in, so there are lots of areas that you can explore and study in Melbourne. But for people who seriously want to harness their degree, work in the same industry, definitely the first place to start is I would encourage them to go into LinkedIn, join the companies that they're interested in, and just follow their profile and see what's going on, what roles are they hiring.
Yeah, thanks for that.
For Malaysia, basically there's a lot of the job employability agent, which is like Job Street, Manpower. You have so many Kellys, right? So you can actually start to look at the job opportunity, that is listed by the like job seekers, websites, agencies and so on. So Malaysia also, we have an agency which is called grad-ready. So which also have, companies that actually list the job offers as well. So other than that, it could be like other social media, all right, like LinkedIn, Facebook. We also have career fair that is organized every quarterly as well in Malaysia. So you just need to keep a lookout, whether is it in the north part, south or central, or as the east coast, of Malaysia. So basically, opportunities is always there. So you just need to actually actively stick. But my advice is, I remember when I first decided to come back, and to look for a job. So what I did was I was very ambitious. So I was aiming at all the consultancy firm. So every single consultancy firm in ASEAN country, I actually wrote to them with all my CV and my cover letter. So entire like 10 countries that I will actually send, in regardless whether depends different states or different cities as well. Say for example like Penang, KL, Singapore, Johor, I sent to all. So that was a very ambitious, when I first decided to find my first job. Yeah, so it's like all big four accounting firms, all right, and also the consultancy firm. So in the end, I actually got the first offer was in KPMG Singapore.
Well,
So it wasn't advertised. So I practically wrote in despite that it is not advertised as well.
Right. So is that something you recommend students do? Just kind of send out as many emails?
It's different strategies.
Right. So is that
from
something
an Australian, just adding that from an Australian perspective, I find that it would be very hard as a fresh graduate to approach recruitment agencies like cold calling, but it's worth a try. It's always worth setting up a profile to be active on social media, because if you have a profile set up and you are engaged in certain conversations, like you have an interest, like you could be interested in the environment, all that, like you click likes and all that, it puts you out there. And when employers look you up and they see that you have such and such a profile and they're interested, it's also helpful. So it's almost about marketing yourself on social media sometimes, if that's your interest that way, that helps a lot.
Yeah. So definitely sounds like that kind of social media helps.
Different generation now.
Yeah, sure. And so when it comes to cold calling, I think you mentioned that cold emailing. How should students go about that if they're thinking of doing it?
So it depends on the sector. Say, for example, if you're actually in the sector of like, say, like from banking and finance or accounting firm, you roughly know where you can actually get the list as well. So like accounting firm, you can actually get the list from the Malaysian Institute of Accountants. If you're engineering, you can always get it from IEM. Yeah, so if you're actually on architect, you can always look out for all the construction companies. So it basically kind of like you can kind of target the sector or the list of the company in the sector based on the interest, based on your degree, that you actually graduate from.
And Kitsuan, from the Australian side, are there similar resources for students?
From the Australian side, it's also roughly similar that there are certain there are recruitment agencies that are very industry specific. So based on your industry, it's worth looking out and see which are the recruitment firms that service the different industries and put your resume and your cover letter out there. So there are some companies that only deal with very specific recruitment agents as well. So it's really hard to know, but Google is always out there, LinkedIn is always out there. So search by industry first, if that's your first port of call or first a foundation, like, to start, if you're starting from zero, just search by industry and target the recruitment companies that are servicing specific industries.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Yeah. So I think that will definitely be helpful advice for our listeners about how to find a lot of these jobs. Could we also talk about, looking for resources when researching the other aspects? So kind of, your salary, your work-life balance. How should students take these into consideration when they're looking for their jobs as well?
Angelina, you go first.
Yeah, sure. So basically, not much on my end, to advise, but maybe student needs to be a bit more open. All right. You can start by talking to your own network, group of friends, group of, family friends, in terms of where are the potential trend or, opportunities, openings. But I guess that is my just a 2 cent advice.
For me right now, for example, I'm advising my kids who are in high school on their career paths, and we said to them, there's so much information available for you now, and I guess similar for uni graduates. Try to tap into a specific network. With CPA Australia, for example, you could tap into there's a level before, and Angelina, you might be able to help me here. There's a level before like you actually become CPA, that there's a group of there's discussion groups that you can tap into. And if you could get the mentor, like speak to people who have been in industry, to then tell you, like, this is the the job requirement 10, 20 years ago might be different now. And in Australia, for example, like, there's certain industries where they're introducing the right to disconnect. So your company can't call you after certain hours. It's all about well-being and all that. So to find out whether a job is the job for you, where it's like, the hours that you're after, you really need to talk to people out there, because it might be published as like, this is the job. And the hours are sometimes how to infer. So even in a medical line, for example, Nicholas, that, like, a trainee doctor will be working ridiculous hours. But there's been, like, a ground movement where there's been feedback back to management, and then they're cutting down the hours. They're making work-life balance more important now. They're recognizing the need to cut off. So if you speak to your network, and depending on what you're interested in, those information you can glean from having different discussions.
Yeah. So I think that networking is really important, isn't it? Just to make sure that
to connect with people who are already in the workforce is really important.
Right. Well, thank you for that. So I think all of that leads quite nicely on to what we want to talk about next in our second section, which would be, we've talked about some of these differences and how to look out for them. But then the question would be, well, I think it would be helpful for our students to know how to tap into that. So we've definitely talked a lot about, your LinkedIn and things. So for the next section, I think we'd like to focus and really zoom in on the details of, what are some of the skills that people are looking for? How do you, would an extra degree help, or do online courses work? So that's what we'll try and cover in the second section. And just as a reminder to our participants that you can leave questions at any point during the chat. We know that some of them have come through as well in the registration form, and we will ask those. But yeah, just as a reminder. So yeah, As we said, we know about some of the differences when working in the two countries. So now we want to move on to some of that personal advice for our students. And so the first thing would be, if you want to work in Malaysia, are there certain skills that you should develop in order for you to move back? And I guess the same for Australia. Would there be kind of differences in the skill sets that companies look for?
Okay, maybe I'll start first. So for us, in basically we would like to see, students who actually have a good results, of course, that they have a good attitude, aptitude, knowledge, competencies, willingness to learn, leadership skill, communication skills. So all these are basically the soft skills beside the hard skills, which is like Python, AWS, Cisco, Java, C++. So all those are, the NLPs, all right, all these different like types of software and technical skills, are also important nowadays. So despite that, even we see a movement in terms of all the sector, they also see the tech requirement as well, because technology cut across all sector. Say, for example, if you're actually in the accounting and finance, so they basically talks about, do you actually have the fintech knowledge, blockchain? Do you actually know the forensic accounting? How's the forensic actually comes in place? What are the skills that you need to actually in place? So can you actually look at problem solving? Can you actually propose, solutions, to your company? So they are also now, companies are also now looking into having graduates who have the entrepreneurial DNA, like skills. So not necessary that, asking the students, you probably, as we talk to students, about 80-90% of students probably say that they will look for a job. So it's not everyone is craft, and not everyone is ready, to embark into the journey of entrepreneurship. So you probably want to see that they have some entrepreneurial skills even at workplace. So which means that they can actually look at identifying opportunity, business opportunities, market tractions, for their products. They are able to do a competitor analysis. They are able to see the differentiation in the product, services, or innovations, inventions that they actually develop, or the service that they provide. So all these are actually very important, for graduates. So yes, results, academic is actually important, but at the same time, your technical knowledge, skills, and the soft skills are also equally as important, as much as the EQ. How do you actually manage your time, manage stress? So I can't say that there's no stress at workplace as well. So I believe different pathway have different stress. So even workplace, we have stress. Even if you are embarking on your startups journey, also there's stress. Students who are in the startups founders often told me that they didn't know when are they going to get the next paycheck for their own staff. Yeah. So that is where they have different problems, but then you need to learn how to actually manage the resources, manage time, manage people, and manage the opportunities, that you have as well. All right. So that's it on my end.
Yeah, and Kitsuan, is there anything that might also be helpful on the Australian side, or would you say that it's mostly the same overlapping skills?
Sure. But before that, I just want to make a comment. That's such a lofty list. It feels quite amazing what Angelina has just shared. And to those who feel like they can't get there yet, because when you're first graduating and you haven't got the direction, don't worry. Every step in the right direction, just take a right step. If you haven't ticked all the boxes that Angelina just shared, it's not the end of your journey. You are learning every day. It is a learning journey for you. So in preparing for work in Australia, like for me, from my experience hiring, I always hire for attitude, because skills can be taught too. Because skills are what you learn at uni may not always be applicable straight away in a real world, and things evolve. So skills can be taught, and if you're keen to learn, so key is having the right attitude. And if you could project that, if that could show in how you describe yourself in your resume, and how you speak or interview, that's really, really important. So for me, what's key is I always hire for attitude. I don't quite look at not so much like degrees are important as well, but that's secondary, but always looking for the right attitude to work. And in that sense, getting ready to push yourself out of the comfort zone. If you don't feel comfortable marketing yourself, you just have to do that. Just put yourself forward, and the knowledge will come. Sometimes it's almost like wing it until you, what's that saying? That you just have to like project that image that you want to be, get that role, and then learn as you go as well. That helps.
Right. Yeah. And so when it comes to showing skills on, say, your CV or to recruiters, especially with technical skills, I think now there are so many options to, say, learn a coding language. Does it help to do, say, additional qualifications or like courses? And then if so, which type? So would an extra degree help, or do those online courses do fine in the eyes of a recruiter?
Okay, you want to start first?
Okay. Just based on experience, because I don't come from a programming or IT background, but just speaking to peers and friends, it's very relevant, but you have to know what the companies are using out there. So is it Python that people are finding it easy to use? And Excel skill is very important. I find that a lot of unis don't always teach a lot of Excel skills, but Excel is such a powerful skill that you don't even need certain programming knowledge to be able to harness the power of Excel. That you could be a business analyst, so not quite in the IT side, but you could be a business analyst, you could be a financial analyst, but you could use Power Queries and design things yourself, design SQL queries yourself. That's very powerful. So if that's something that you can learn on the side, Excel, SQL, or the next level Python, that would help. But being able to apply in real life is also helpful. So if there's an opportunity for you to offer your work for free, just to get you started, like if you are able to find some sort of network where you could volunteer and build something for somebody for free, put that on your resume and build up from there, that can be helpful. So those are the simple courses that you could do, like even now, basic, like not basic Excel, but hopefully like some sort of intermediate Excel, because basic Excel you should already have from your like commerce, finance, undergraduate degree. Everybody should learn Excel, I think.
Right. So Excel, I mean, it's not something that comes across as stands out to a lot of people, but I think you're right. Like, it can be broadly applied. Yeah. And so would you say that the best way to then show that you have those skills, is it through an extra qualification or projects or both?
The skills that I mentioned before, you can get as an extra qualification, because there's a lot of online certification that you can acquire. I'm not sure what's the platform for all these courses, but there are a lot where it could be Microsoft certification, it could be all sorts of other certification that is not expensive for you to take on. There are a lot of websites that offer discounted or some free courses that you could take on and add. So then you can add those down in your resume that might help in the area that you want to pursue. There's no point just adding here.
Maybe I just add on as well. All right. So basically, let's say, for example, for engineers, they might actually want to take extra additional learning on robotics, to see how robotics actually impact the engineering sector, especially in petroleum engineering or like in mechatronics. All right. So you might actually see IoTs as well. So we have some engineers who decided that they would want to learn extra on terms of how to actually do ethical hacking. So by being certified cybersecurity engineers, or they could actually wants to look into sometimes you want to do something for fun, all right? So you might want to look at something that you will enjoy doing. Yeah, so learning different skills. You can actually do coding now with the less code or codeless. Yeah, so you don't need to learn the programming as what it used to be. You can actually use a lot of codeless tools which are actually available to do the coding as well. You can also ask ChatGPT, to write the entire coding as well. So those are also some skills, even using AI tools, all right, it's going to be helpful as well as you go forward in terms of work employment. So you can actually get AI to help you in your day-to-day job sometimes, all right? Interpretation. So I have a friend, who actually sent me a AI, analyze statements on the financial statements of a company and say, can you please read this and see whether is it fair, from the AI generated, interpreted statements. So you can practically need to know which tool to use, in AI as well. Yeah. So then you will probably, of course, for the professionals like accountant, architects, engineer, lawyer. So all those you still need to go back to your professional qualifications because those are definitely valuable, in terms of experience, in terms of getting you ready, for the professionalism as well. All right. So I guess that's it from my end.
Great. Well, since we brought that up, I think it would just be interesting to ask, what do you two think about using AI? Do you use it personally as well?
All right, for us in the academic, we are now trying to see how are we going to detect whether the assignments are actually completed using AI because it's hard, because Turnitin cannot do the job better than, cannot do the job. So we are basically now looking out, having tools, so we have the students from computer sciences, developing tools, to crack, how do I identify if the assignments is actually done using AI or thesis is written using AI. Yeah, so those are going to be interesting. But yes, overall, we do use AI at some point of our life. All right, not for assignment. All right, so, but yes, you do. For assignment, if let's say that you can't understand a certain chapter, that you want the interpretation in the layman term, it does help. Let's say, especially if it's not in your cup of tea. Say, for example, if you are from computer science, you're actually studying one elective module, which is entrepreneurship or accounting, how to read your financial statements you don't understand. So you might actually get AI. So it used to be ask Google, now it's ask AI. All right. So it does help, but we need to learn how to actually use AI wisely, all right, and not actually abuse, the AI tools as well. Yeah, in our life. All right. So that's it on my side. Keep yours.
For me, I do use it. I just use it to ask AI to write me an itinerary for a trip, for example. That's just as a backbone, and I also have to make sure my kids don't abuse it because AI is actually ChatGPT is actually banned in certain Australian schools, but they do use it, and the teachers are always on the lookout for it. So teachers are trying to be a step ahead. So we do use it in AI in our personal lives, but as Angelina mentioned, you have to. It's almost like asking Google now. You have to be able to critically assess it. So a lot of people are not ready. If you feel like you're not ready to critically assess the information, it's very dangerous. So for example, a financial statement, is it fair or not? That person has to ask Angelina. So like AI can't answer those for you. So the right way to use AI is like the user still has to critically assess what AI is giving, what ChatGPT, for example, is giving you is correct. So that assessment is still up to your critical assessment. In terms of work and all that, certain workplaces encourage it, certain workplaces may explicitly say do not use it, but it helps. If it helps make processes quicker, why not? Write me a letter. Like if you're a busy doctor and you need to write some letters, why not have that letter written? If you're in marketing, just as a backbone, and then you add your own flavor. So if it helps make work easier, if you're in law, get the extracts of the law, for example, quote me Australian Corporations Act, for example, for this case. If it makes your work easier, use it as a tool, but you have to be able to critically assess it and not copy it wholesale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
That's
I
it
think that
from me.
balance is interesting because I read an article a couple of days ago, and then even unis here, they are starting to use it to actually mark students' papers. So
Yes.
yeah, all
Yeah,
kinds of
we do.
interesting.
Yeah, you can't stop it and embrace it, but use it in the right way. Definitely.
Yep, yep.
We are even talking about how to encourage, the research, by using more AI tools, to expedite some of the research and invention.
Right. And I'm sure for you at APU, like being a tech uni, I'm sure that's that's particularly important, isn't it?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. Okay. And then another thing would be, well, we did talk about this earlier a bit, and looking at the industries in the two countries. And then, Angelina, you were saying in Malaysia you have a growing kind of computer science, IT field. How should students continue to look out for these? Because, I'm sure the job market changes quite quickly. And so how can students look for certain trends and how can they kind of stay ahead of that even?
Okay. So there are some government agencies which are actually also working very closely on the ground with the businesses, like Graduan, is one of those. So you can actually Google, GRADUAN, Graduan. You can also look at the some of the news, some of the trend as well. So they are also like, I think Job Streets, also post up, quite a number of like reports, and also analysis in terms of what are the jobs, which are available, for the next 3 to 5 years. So, but of course, the job market changes, every 2 to 3 years. So it's good to actually get into network. You can also talk to like all the business chambers, councils, members, that you can actually get some advice from some of your mentors as well. Okay, that's it.
Thanks. And what about from the Australian side?
For Australia, I can only speak to the industry that I'm familiar with. I, for example, would suggest business graduates look at Hayes. Hayes issue a job market report. It also issues like a salary expectation, like what you can expect as a graduate entering the market in different areas, different company sizes. So look at that and see what are the areas. Again, in Australia, it's quite dynamic too. It changes. There may be growth. A lot of growth could also be directed by government funding. So see, students who are interested in looking for opportunities in Australia can look at where government are directing their spending in. Where government directs their spending, those are the areas of growth and will have wider opportunities of employment. So healthcare, building, for example, in certain areas. So look into those. I'm familiar with Hayes for the salary survey or job employment market survey, but look out wider. There'll be other specific reports for specific industry.
Right. And then I guess when it comes to investment, so I've read that in Malaysia, we're looking a lot at semiconductor industries. Is that something that, Angelina, you're familiar with?
Semiconductor is still a growing industry as well, especially in the northern part of Malaysia, which is in Penang, Butterworth, around Kulim area. So those are the areas that are still requires quite a number of the E&E because of the increase in the technology. So E&E, the chips, microchips are also in demand as well. So it's actually in tandem in terms of the increase in demand.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, and so I think it's good just to hear like what students can be thinking about, and just on that note, I think something that I've heard. I'm not too familiar because I'm not in this area, but I heard someone say that the computer science degree is the new arts degree. A lot of people have it, and then it becomes quite a saturated field. So is that true? And if so, how can, or even if it isn't, like how can students make sure that, if their degree becomes too kind of saturated, that they stay on top?
Okay, so whether you are Bachelor of Science or Bachelor of Arts in Computer Science, and then you also have Bachelor of Bachelor of Science, and then in all the different computing verticals, which is from like AR, VR, app development, game development, your virtual, the virtual part, you can have IoTs, you can have software engineering, you can have the cyber security. So all these verticals, or even data analytics, data sciences, they actually serve different industry. So it depends. Like for example, cybersecurity and data science, is very hot in the market now. If you look at the analysis of the job opportunity, they're actually one of the highest. The reason because everybody now starts to go into AI, into machine learning, into data analytics, and see whether to predict what is the trend of a consumer trend, customer trend, user needs, to look into the how do I protect from cyber attack. So all those are up and coming, in terms of the demand as well. So you will start to see some actually slow down, which are slightly different, in terms of the different needs as well. So, but generally, I guess, computer science is actually still very much needed across. So we are basically, have like employers, which are practically really looking for students, on this sector as well. Yeah. So yes, it's still a huge gap that to be filled up.
And I think because you mentioned the kind of areas of interest in computer science, so at that point, would it be the soft skills that you should, really develop to make sure that no matter what happens to the market, that you can still be competitive?
So if you talk to the huge, like, computer related companies like software developers and so on that we actually work very closely with as well. So yes, they are looking at the attitude, because sometimes, when you are dealing with developing the programs, the coding, so you need to ensure that the person could actually, so the soft skills, like, are you able to take the stress, time management, project management, so how well you can actually complete, the programming part. So for them, basically technical skills can be learned. Like, let's say if I do not know about how to use AWS, fine, I can just take up a course, and learn how to do it. I can do Python, in like 48 hours course. So it is actually teachable, but attitude is not teachable. Attitude is a person, and not just attitude, it's the aptitude. Yeah. So aptitude is now getting more important as well, to be seen by companies. So you start to see the behavioral. So even some companies requires the graduates to actually undergo they call it a psychometric test. It's kind of like a personality test, to see whether are you suited, in terms of the job profession that you choose or you dream to be. Yeah. So that does helps as well, in terms of knowing ourselves, where is our strength, where is our weaknesses, how well or how willing are we, to actually close and the gap in our weaknesses.
Right. Yeah, thanks for sharing. And I think that's important for students who might be worried about, how things are changing so quickly. And if, I don't know, one day their degree will become obsolete, then at least that's not a concern for them. Yeah. And Kitsuan, do you have any thoughts as well?
Yeah, so I work for a company that's very IT intensive, and just speaking from what I can observe is that the human element, the commercial element, is what students can offer, because increasingly, what I see in the workplace here is that we're outsourcing basic DevOps, basic development work to other countries. So there'll be like cheaper countries in areas such as like maybe even Vietnam or other areas in the world where it's in India where it's cheaper for codes to be built, IT codes to be developed. But that link between commercial side, like understanding what needs to be built, that role is really important. So if you have a basic science degree, a computer science degree, what you can offer the next step is also build your knowledge and understanding of the company that you are planning to join, because the linkage between the commercial side and the code that you're writing is very important, because eventually that can be replaced too. Like, there'll be people are crowd sharing codes can be picked up and dropped anytime, but to turn it into something that is fit for purpose for a company, that commercial understanding is very important. So people with a basic computer science degree can enhance their knowledge by also learning more about the specific industry they join, because you've got a basic science degree, but you could be joining any type of industry. It's IT in any type of industry. It could be mining, finance, health. How do you apply it? How do you make yourself useful? That's different. That's your key differentiator. If you can offer that, you'll be very employable.
Right. All right. Well, thank you for sharing. I think it's important that our students know, sure, that there are differences in working, but that, a lot of the skills will be transferable at the end of the day. And, what those skills are will be important for them. So, yeah, thank you for sharing on those two sections that we wanted to cover for this Suara Muda. The first being about working differences, and the second being more personal advice for our students as they prepare to graduate and work. So we did receive some questions, and that's what we'd like to move on to. So slightly less structured section of the discussion. So the first one came through our registration form, which is, what are the most accurate websites for salary information? Because they find that most sources online don't feel reliable.
Kit, do you want to start?
I would suggest, like for example, in Australia, Glassdoor doesn't work. In Australia, to be more specific, maybe look at, there's a website called Graduate Connection. You could have a look. You could speak to friends who have entered the job market recently. For me, we use, our company uses a financial services guide. Like there's a company that compiles salary information to then get what companies are paying. Universities, when they have job fairs, if you speak to them, like all the different people, you might get an idea of what it is reflective, and it's also reflective of the demand. So what is in demand might not always be what's on paper as well. Like, it could be supply and demand. So unfortunately, if you've got a big batch of a certain group of a cohort of like accountants coming out, then saturating the market, then that particular time it might be a bit softer. So there's apps and webs during the year as well. If you are employed at different time of the year, depending on demand, that might change and it might not reflect what's on paper. So for my industry, we go with, like, in general, with Hays. If you could look into that from the commercial side. For the other industries, I can't advise.
Right. Yeah, thanks for that. And
Yep, I guess for Malaysia, you can actually, if you start to Google, say like salary, salary report in Malaysia. So you probably comes up to be, interestingly, JobStreet actually provides, the salary comparison. Then you have the Hayes, you have Michael Page, all right? So all those are still recruitment agencies or related. But surprisingly, if you actually look into Department of Statistics Malaysia, they also provide the salary comparison as well. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, is that based on tax information?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that would be definitely a good one to check out then. Sounds a lot more reliable as well.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Another question we got. So we talked about LinkedIn quite a bit. And then their question was, is it that important? Or I guess if we were to reframe that, if you didn't have LinkedIn, would it make it a lot more difficult for you?
I'll go
So,
first. I'll go first. For my experience, I think it's going to be helpful. It's more helpful than not to have a LinkedIn profile, because when you set a profile up, employees will check you out on LinkedIn and see, like, what have you liked, what have you posted, and before even meeting you or interviewing you, they already have formed a perception of the person that you are, or the values that you represent. So just be very mindful of that when you set up your profile, what you want to show to the world, and that could work for you, and it could also work against you. If you made a post or made a comment that might be perceived to be negative to you, then and you can't help yourself, then you better not use that tool. Just be conscious of that when you do put yourself out in social media.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because I guess some people don't think about what they're liking, but even that can have an impact, like you're saying.
Definitely, that button is so quick to push. The moment you
Yeah.
push it, it's out there, and people know what your values are, what you're leaning towards, and just be mindful of that in a professional world, because it is still a professional platform. It's not a platform for fun.
Right. Yeah.
right. No comments on my end.
Great. Okay. No worries.
Kit has just covered all.
Right. Okay. Right. Thanks for that. And so another one would be, when you're looking at salary information, how should you adjust it for cost of living? Like, how do you do that calculation?
Kit, maybe you want to start on Australia?
It's not something that I've considered, Nicholas, so let me have a think about it. I've never worked backwards. I've never worked like, this is what I need to survive. This is the job I want. You go by what the market is after, and then you tweak your lifestyle to then fit within that. I'm just commenting because I might be out of touch, where you can't live the life that you want to live in Instagram, for example, because it could be outside your means. So it feels like that question, I don't follow that question. It should be, go with what your job offers, and then you adjust your lifestyle, and if it can be. I understand that cost of living pressures are very real in Melbourne, in Australia right now. But then pick wisely. Then the job that you're choosing should hopefully be able to sustain lifestyle, a reasonable lifestyle in a city of your choice.
Right. So I guess would you suggest that as long as the salary is reasonable, that at that point it's up to you to kind of budget and make sure that it fits within that?
Yeah, and Nicholas, I'm looking at I'm just before this talk, I'm looking at starting salaries for graduates in 2024, and it's in Australia, like the numbers that I'm looking at, accounting and professional is among the lower ones. It starts at 64,000 Australian. At the higher end, you've got oil and gas at 90,000. Mining is always higher. So that's very reasonable to live by. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Even for Malaysia now, fresh graduates, some of my students who actually from my students who actually graduated, so they tell me that they are now getting an average salary of like 3.5K, up to about 5. Yeah, so it depending on which companies that they actually say. I'm talking about fresh graduates. Yeah, so if you actually have a master degree, probably another 4,000, extra. For PhD, academics has always been the lowest, all right? And that also, you're talking about academics with PhD with no teaching experience, easily is about 6 to 7,000. Yeah, so actually salary scales has actually increased, but of course, Malaysia's cost of living also you start to see there's an increase as well. There's an increase in the pinch due to the inflation and due to the pressure of the oil prices as well. So we start to see oil prices less subsidized, and also certain things are less subsidized, certain items are less subsidized in Malaysia. So yes, I will echo the same, as Kit. It's like it's not about how much that we earn, it's how do we actually adjust our lifestyle, how we live. It is not easy to live a simple life. All right, so if you understand, so it's very easy to live a luxurious life. All right, it's not easy to live a simple life, but if we can live a very simplistic life, it does helps as well. So it depends on what you're looking at. Even eating out in Malaysia is now getting more expensive as well. So cooking has been an option, for Malaysian as well. So as compared to in the past when many doesn't cook, so you start to see the trend and the changes, but like I say, you just have to adjust, you have to make your ends, meet somewhere and somehow. All right. And I believe that if you're actually very hardworking, there's always a lot of part-time jobs available as well. You can always do many other things, with your extra time, that you actually have. So, well, that
Right. No, yeah. So I think, oh, sorry, Kit, were you?
I was just going to add too, it just came to my mind now that in Australia, for example, different cities have different pay levels for the same job. So then you consider the city. So if you think, oh, in Sydney, I could earn a lot more than in Melbourne, but then just note that the cost of living in Sydney is higher, your rental will be higher, and also factor in transport costs. So if you take on a job, but you have to travel every day and you have to drive, for example, 40, 50 kilometers, that adds up to your time, your cost. So all those are the considerations that you have to make. So you might be a lower salary, but it's just 5 minutes travel, better than getting another $10,000, $20,000 more, but you have to spend two hours traveling every day. So those are the considerations.
Right. Yeah. But I think what's good what's good to hear is that it's not as dire as I guess some people might think it is. Yeah, because from just my experience as well, speaking to people, I think I can understand where that question comes from because, like you said, a lot of people are expecting quite a bit, and so then they want to try and work backwards. Whereas I guess your advice would be, look, just see what you have, and then you try and go based off that. So I think that's good for our students to keep in mind. Yeah. Okay, we have another question, which is, they're finding it quite challenging to find a job related to the course. And so if I don't want to pursue a career directly related to my degree, so for example, international relations, how should I explore other job opportunities?
so I take a general statement first. All right. So we do have students which are graduated in accounting but decided not to go into accounting profession as well. So they decided to run he or her own, dance studio. Some of them actually has the event management company. Some of them actually works on advertisement. Many will probably goes into marketing job because accountant makes a better marketer because they understand your bottom line, right, better. So it actually very much depends. So on what is your interest in terms of that. I also have seen engineers decided to be a photographer, yeah, and then they give up the profession, after like 10 years, 20 years, and decided I'm going to go into my interest pathway. So I have people who are friends, which are engineer as well, and goes into plantation. So they decided to explore, but the engineering, what I want to stress is that the engineering knowledge and the background helps him, in the plantation business because he can actually understand how the drying processes work, how the mechanical of the engineering thinking, works as well. So he's very mechanical person. So then he actually able to develop his agriculture business to the next level. So by looking at drying process, looking at packaging processes, so it's actually not the end of the world. Just like myself, I started as the auditor and accountant and decided to move into academic, and I found joy, in my position. So my 2 cent advice is you must enjoy what you do. It is not what you need to do when you graduated with that degree. So I also have colleagues, which actually has a PhD in DNA, human DNA genome,
Right.
and he's actually do tech transfer, and now he's actually looking after the entrepreneurship incubation center. He's
Oh,
just totally different, from what he studies as a PhD, for so many years. Yeah. So, well, the bottom line is you must enjoy what you do. Life is short. Live your life in abundance, and the rest will fall in place.
all right. Thank you. That's very inspirational, but good to hear as well that as long as you're following what you're interested in, then you'll end up finding a way. Yeah. And then Kitswan, did you have anything as well?
Nothing further to add. It was very inspirational from Angelina. And to the person asking the question though, if you've picked the degree to study, so it was international relations that you just mentioned, what was the reason why you chose it? If it's something that you love, that you're passionate about, think about how you could explore it. Your degree doesn't have to be a perfect fit to your first job. Just try different things. Just keep trying different things until you find what you love.
Right. All right. Well, thank you to our speakers. As it's nearing 3 p.m. for us here in Australia, or 1 if you're in Malaysia, I think we'll end with one last question, which is if you had one advice for the students, one piece of advice for our students here, what would you give them?
Okay, for me, basically, I'll just to say, enjoy the sunshine, the weather, the snow in Australia. All right, you won't get snow back here. So if you have a chance, enjoy all the culture. All right, from the wine, testing to the apple picking to the outback, camping. All right, so enjoy those before you decide to come back.
Right. Thank you for that.
But Malaysia always welcome, our own, for return as well. All right. So,
Kitswan?
yeah.
Um, Sage words. I love it. Thank you, Angelina, for reminding me to appreciate every day here too as well. But yeah, for a student, you're very fortunate to be able to study in a very good, safe environment in a country that offers so many opportunities. So while you're here, embrace all the good things that you want to try, and if you're deciding to go home, then take those good values and do good things when you're back in Malaysia, and all the best.
All right. Yeah, thank you so much. And I think that's a good positive note to end with. Just enjoying what you have. Although today's very rainy, so it feels a lot like Malaysia anyway. But yeah, so thank you to our speakers. And with all that's been said, we hope that you have gained insights into what your futures might look like. I think what I gathered from this is it's quite quite an open discussion, and that's because the future is quite open, isn't it? So whatever happens, you're thinking about whether you want to work here or there. And I guess it all depends on what's being offered, but also what you are willing to take from those. And I think that's what, if I took away something, it's that you just take what you can and do the best out of it. Yeah. So thank you to our speakers, and thank you for volunteering your time and your thoughts for our discussion. I think it is important that our students understand the perspectives of professionals as well, because we can discuss amongst ourselves and you can look at Google, but like you said, it's about knowing what to trust, and so it just helps to have people who have those experiences and whom we definitely can trust. So on behalf of MASCA and our audience, we would like to thank you two for this with a small token of appreciation, and we do hope to stay in touch looking forward. Just as we end, we'll quickly run through our lucky draw session as we tend to. So this is for participants who are still here. So if you don't mind just letting us know if you are in the chat, and then we will contact you. So we'll do 2 for today. All right. Genevieve, are you there? I saw her in the chat earlier. Don't think she's here. Okay, is Tamli Jung in the chat? Kashairi? Is in the chat. All right. Thanks for that. And we'll spin once more. Akif, are you here with us? Yes, Akif is here. All right. So thank you to our 2 participants and to all of our participants as well. So yeah, once again, that's a great way to end our Suara Muda. Let me just change my screen. All right, so thank you everyone for attending, and a big thank you to our speakers once again. We do hope to see you at future Suara Mudas. So this time we've had 2 in a row, and we hope that they've kind of linked. Last time we looked at some of the initiatives going back home. Here, talking about the decision. So do follow us on
Can we take a
social
group
media.
photo before we go off?
Yes. Oh yes, absolutely.
I think
Can we get
people are
everyone's
trying to log
cameras
off.
on?